Welcome back, everyone. This is another episode of Grill to the Diaspora. I'm your host, Nakaira G, and today we have a guest here by the name of Yazid Muhammad, and we are going to be talking about living in Ghana, working in Ghana, and the benefits of citizenship. So, welcome on, Yazid.
Thank you very much for having me.
I would rent out an apartment, for the year. And I always pay local prices because I will put on the accent and I will speak the language very, very quickly. Like I do not pay foreigner prices in Ghana. It's just not my lifestyle. But I know that there are a lot of diasporans who enjoy the foreigner, experience and it does affect the rest of us, like you said, because if the last diasporan they met gave them this $50 tip, and now they done met you and now it can cause a lot of tension. And in a lot of cases, at least for myself, especially as a woman, it can cause a lot of issues, especially with the Uber situation and things like that. People expecting for you to even pay in dollars sometimes just for a 10-minute ride. Because if you're in a certain area like Osu or you're going to East Legon, um, I lived in East Legon Hills during my last year in Ghana in an area called Santo, and so which is close to Nanakron Gate. And so, that area in Ashale Botri, is very, I would say like developed. The road is developed up until you get to Nanakron Gate, and then it's completely dirt road, even though there are still big houses and Range Rovers and G-Wagons driving up and down this dirt road. But, that juxtaposition, I think it does confuse a lot of foreigners, specifically diasporans, because we'll be driving past these really big houses and we'll be driving past people with Mercedes Benzes and stuff like that. And then we're in this little taxi. I took Trotro like everywhere. I don't necessarily advise other diasporans to take Trotro, but again, like because I went to college in Ghana, I'm comfortable with taking Trotro. I know how to get around all of Accra via Trotro, but it is a very local experience, and then there's certain areas where Uber don't go. You know what I mean? Uber is not necessarily available in all of the different regions. So I think, if you like how you mentioned, you don't necessarily rely on those type of services, but for a lot of people, they are relying on those services because they are maybe older or they don't really have an interest of having a very local experience. Not everyone wants to speak the language and things like that. So for it's kind of like it's like we all are kind of in it together, but at the same time, we're all being affected by the different lifestyles that we all have because we're all coming in with different classes, right? And so speaking on that, for those who are under 40, I feel like the experience moving to Ghana is vastly different from those who are coming, retirement age and things like that. Particularly because, a lot of us have to come to Ghana either with our own businesses or with some type of remote job from abroad or things like that. And even though that is kind of marketed to people under 40, make sure you have your own business or start your own business or have your own remote job because you can't really rely on having a work permit and work within the country with different, whether it's a local business, a foreign business. I'm not too sure how popular diasporans working for Ghanaian companies or other foreign companies is. And so, do you think that that impacts those of us who are under 40, where there's a different pressure where we kind of have to have this huge amount of capital, or we have to have a business, or we have to have this remote business and make a certain amount of money that maybe the retirement community faces maybe a different set of pressures?
Absolutely. Coming as a young, coming as a person without a steady income, and a retired person probably just getting about 2,000 to 25 to $3,000 a month, probably average. Somebody that works, and you are coming as a 35, 30-year-old person uh, with not a whole lot of experience in terms of work experience. you need to uh, work on getting yourself prepared before coming for remote work. Because if you try to rely on the CD as a diasporan, you are not trained for that life. You know what I mean? You don't have the network to go somewhere and get some food. You know what I mean? You don't have aunties, cousins, schoolmates, and that sort of support system around you. And on top of that, people are looking at you thinking that you should have. Not to mention you feel like you should have, right? So there's the ego part of it, and then how am I going to deal with this situation? Somebody would say, well, why don't you just call your auntie or your brother, tell them send you $1,000, buy you a car, and you yourself know very well that's not realistic, and I wouldn't even open my mouth to call my relatives and ask them some craziness like that, knowing their situation, knowing the real life situation that's going on. Maybe some Ghanaians that are living in the United States, either they're doing very well or they're fronting very hard. To say, oh yeah, I'm gonna send them some money. Maybe they'll just eat Burger King for the next whatever. But very well. I know very well. I don't necessarily have that network in the United States. So as people are trying to adjust themselves here, I also teach English online. After my business had a problem, I had to close my business in 2023. I began. Fortunately, a sister came from Chicago, Adele, and she had started a online online school training people how to become online teachers. And I had it on my mind, how am I going to be able to stay here in Ghana? So I began pursuing it years prior to that. But in 2023, the opportunity presented itself. And that's Emerging English Coaching is the website. So, that helped me to kind of stabilize, in terms of having a dollar income. Where initially I was relying on my restaurant and some of the other streams of revenue that I created with my business. But as the economy started to go down, people started having less money, disposable income, local. You just can't rely, you can't build a business in Ghana and think you're going to only rely on the African diasporans to come and support your business. It's not enough of us, and we're spread out. This is why the advantage of having a community or village is attractive because fine, you know, maybe you want some fried chicken that you're familiar with. Once a we can have the mind. Oh man, I want pizza on Monday, chicken on Wednesday. Chinese food on this day. Where maybe Ghanaians are just cool with fufu and rice soup Monday through Sunday. You know what I'm saying? Their diet is different. Their mind about it is different as well. But we have to, if you plan to stay here, and especially as a young person, you have to adapt. I had a close friend who, when I came in '09, a Ghanaian brother, Kojo, we were moving together, and every time we went out to get food, I was like going to a restaurant, a hotel restaurant. They'd be spending 200 CDs, which maybe was $20. It would feel like a lot of money, but he told me if I want to live in Ghana, I have to learn how to eat at chop bars. When you spend 20 CDs, they eat very well, So I had to have a consciousness shift, to be able to go into some of the chop bars and say, okay, the food is hot and this is, it's not a hotel, but it's delicious food. So, some of those things are how you have to have a consciousness shift in order to stay here, maintain yourself. In terms of income, the best way to stabilize yourself is working remotely and trying to earn in dollars. You could and can get jobs working for Ghanaian companies, and I would suggest companies like VRA, that's a Volta River Authority, maybe an engineer. If you are working for Gridco, you need to really have skills, and that is a totally another experience of working or living in Ghana because you have the work dynamic. The same challenges probably in any workplace. You got cliques that like you, and here you have ethnicity as the or tribalism, undertone in some of the things. So, if you don't speak any other language, then, you may find yourself in a problem because the more Ghanaians speak English, they're most comfortable in their own language, and you find that people break off in that kind of way. Oh, same way when you go to university, people from California, they're kind of over there. The people from New York, they're kind of over here. People from the South, depending on what part of the South you're from, they're down there. We kind of break ourselves up in that kind of fashion. Same thing in Ghana. They break themselves up in God, Ewe, Chi, blah, 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 you know. And they're not that they don't intermingle, but those are some of the dynamics that you need to know that is going on. So if you choose to go into the work world, know that is part of it. But not to say that, not to discourage anybody from it, but you need to also know how to live off of $600 a month, right? That's about
Agree.
6,000 CDs roughly. You need to learn how to live off 6,000 CDs a month. And for the average Ghanaian, they would be like, man, that's good wood, you know. But they don't buy they don't buy club every day, and they don't eat chicken on Monday, beef on Tuesday, this on that. But they'll have a different lifestyle. So you have to be willing to adjust your lifestyle to have longevity in a place like outside of the United States. Like you said, in the United States, there are some social programs to assist you. Here, the social programs come from family, come from your village. You know what I'm saying? There ain't no welfare necessarily here, but that's reliable. That's going to give you money that you're going to be able to have sustenance with. You know, that's why you find a lot of people they also farm.